Hello, once again. I'm going to try as best I can to get through this lecture. My sinus infection is slowly morphing into pneumonia, so I'll be constantly coughing, for which I apologize. Actually, I took some medicine here just a few minutes ago, so hopefully it'll get better as the lecture progresses. But now, pardon me. Speaking of, but now what we're going to talk about is we're going to move into the future, um, and talk about some futuristic texture maps. Um, and specifically, that'll be things like, the insides and the outsides of spaceships. More than anything else, spaceships and space stations and futuristic machinery pretty much define science fiction. I mean, that's the definition of science fiction. And pardon me, the cat is actually nudging the microphone. Okay. Anyhow, yeah, she hates to hear me record. Anyhow, I mean, that's the very nature of science fiction is technology, um, and it's technology that does not exist in our current world as it is to you and me. So it's either got to be um, in the future when such technology exists, or it's got to be in an alternate timeline where it might be 1984, but we already have warp drive. And since I'm old enough to remember 1984, I can tell you we did not have warp drive back then. Um, most times science fiction is the future. Um, and why am I going on about this? Honestly, because it helps to know your genre. And that is where, quite frankly, a college degree in, if you're going to go into a design related field, especially game design, quite frankly, you need to know a lot of stuff that isn't directly related to video game design. You need to know history. You need to know design. You need to know literature. You need to know film theory. All these other things. The more you know, the better. And you don't have to take classes in all of that. I'm not recommending that at all. But I'm just saying the more you know, the further you'll go. And that's a horrible cliche. And I actually just kind of vomited just a little bit, even just saying that. But, you know, um, the more you know, the more knowledge you have to draw on to create something new. There's two ways to create something new. You either take two things that have never been combined before and combine them into something new, which is 99% of design. And that's gross generalization. I don't know if it's 99% or not. It doesn't matter. Or you invent something that has no precedent whatsoever in the sum total of human existence. That's pretty rare. We've been around for thousands of years. Um, you know, uh, Recorded history goes back um, at least about 3,000 years. So pretty much all the thoughts have already been thought. But that doesn't mean all the thoughts have been combined in all their possible permutations and combinations. Um, there's a line from U2 that Bono sings. Oh, yes, every artist is a cannibal, and I think I've actually quoted this before. But what he's talking about is, um, I think that's Bono and U2. If it's not U2 and Bono, please email me and correct me. Um, but what that line refers to is that every artist takes stuff that other people have thought of and combines them into new ways. And I completely agree with that. So anyhow, where does this leave us with science fiction texture maps? Well, the problem with science fiction texture maps that we don't have with anything else we've done all semester long is we don't know what the inside of a futuristic spaceship looks like because we're not in the future. All right? If you can tell me what the inside of a spaceship is going to look like 300 years from now and then prove it factually, I will give you an A in this class right now. All you have to be able to do is prove it, and that means you have to be able to time travel and take me with you. So if you are Doctor Who, you get an A in this class. Otherwise, you're going to have to figure it out for yourself what the inside of a spaceship is going to look like. So the question is, how do you figure it out? How do you figure out what something looks like when it doesn't exist and has never existed before? Well, like I said, you can either figure it out, you can either create something completely new, or you can combine things that already exist, but combine them in ways that they've never been combined before to make something that has never existed before. And in science fiction design, whether it's making a spaceship for a film or whether it's making a texture map for a science fiction game, you don't want to create something completely new in many cases. I won't say most, but the reason why this is because let's say that, somebody says, Tim, we're going to make a game that's set 40,000 years in the future. Okie dokie, cool. Sounds fun, and if I get paid, so much the better. We want it to look completely unlike anything's ever been we don't want it to look like anything that's ever been done before. Okay, fine. That means I've got to come up with something that's never even been thought of before, so the deck is already stacked against me. But let's say that I actually somehow managed to pull it off. If it's never been done before, if it's unlike anything that has ever been seen before, it will be completely unrecognizable. It will not look like the inside of a spaceship. It will not look like the inside of anything. It will be weird to the power of infinity. That's how people will describe it. Why? Well, first of all, before we even get into the why, the problem with that is, when they look at it and they say it's weird, well, the reason why they're saying it's weird is because they've never seen anything like it before, and more specifically, there's no common frame of reference. They look at it, and since it doesn't look like anything they've ever seen before, they can't say, oh, that's like so-and-so, or that reminds me of so-and-so. It doesn't remind anybody of anything because it's not like anything. So that immediately takes them out of the experience of the game, or the movie, or the animation, or whatever, and makes them think about the design. And since they're going to have a negative emotional reaction to it, it's going to take them out of the experience, put them in the make them aware that they're the audience watching a game or whatever, and then give them negative emotions. Congratulations, I've just killed a game. I went too far out. I got too creative. I got too weird. I got too original. Well, fortunately, that's very hard to do in the first place, so it doesn't happen very often. What's the second option? Well, like I said before, combining things. Now, what I want to do is I've been mentioning movies. What I want to do is talk to you about one of the greatest design jobs in science fiction ever made. And that is the spaceship Nostromo from the 1979 film Alien, made by Ridley Scott. Now, I know that you're thinking, well, Tim, this is a game design class. And I'll just point out that this film, Alien, in 1979, it created a new genre. And the genre of a horror film, a scary movie set in outer space. And it terrified audiences. There were reports of heart attacks, all kinds of stuff. It's one of the scariest movies ever made. And it also happens to be set in the future on a spaceship. The name of the spaceship was the Nostromo, which, by the way, is a literary reference. So again, if you know your literature, if you take an extra English class or two, it just gives you that much more power. But what I want to do is I want to show you the interior of this spaceship because here we go. Because this has been copied and inspired so many other video games. There are so many science fiction video games with interiors that were inspired by, and that's in quotation marks, inspired by, and truly they were inspired by, the interior of this film. I mean, the interior of the spaceship in this film. And why is the interior of this spaceship so historically important in the history of science fiction design? Well, first of all, it was made by Ridley Scott. He made Alien, he made Blade Runner, and I consider him to be the greatest science fiction director of all time. And I say that as a diehard Star Wars fan, and I absolutely love George Lucas. The reason why, let me rephrase that. I will say he is my favorite. I will not say he's the best, although I wouldn't rule it out. He is certainly my favorite director of all time. The reason why Ridley Scott is my favorite director is because he started out as a designer. His job was to design sets for other movies. I mentioned Doctor Who earlier. If I'm not mistaken, he was at some point even involved with the very early series of Doctor Who. I could be wrong about that. I'd have to check. But anyhow, the point being, why is Ridley Scott such a great designer for movie sets and spaceships that are such effective designs that they have pretty much influenced almost every science fiction video game in terms of look and design since 1979, which is pretty much the entire history of the gaming industry. This one ship pretty much set the tone for the look of science fiction spaceships in video games. Well, what Ridley Scott did was he took things that already existed and combined them in new ways. But here's the kicker. Now here's the payoff. He did it in such a way that he took things that are familiar and then he redesigned them and he tweaked them and he repurposed them and he added other things to them so that they were at the same time new yet familiar. For the Nostromo, he said, okay, this is supposed to look like a spaceship set about 150 years into the future. What is a spaceship? What do we have right now that's close to a spaceship in the time that you're listening to this lecture, or in 1979 when he was making the film? So let's ask ourselves, what is like the environment that we are creating? Do we have anything right now in existence as part of the human race that in a way has something significant in common with a spaceship? What is a spaceship? A spaceship is a sealed environment that protects the human beings inside from a dangerous environment outside and then allows for travel. In other words, it's a vehicle that seals its occupants off from the environment immediately surrounding that vehicle. Two things come to mind. You've already thought of them. Airplanes and submarines. Both of those are designed for the exact same purpose as a spaceship. They just go in different places. One goes in the air, one goes under the water. So what Ridley Scott did, because Sir Ridley Scott is an absolute genius, is he said, all right, well, let's make part of the spaceship look like an airplane. So we've got all of these panels on the bridge, the control center, that look like they were taken out of an airplane. Specifically, he wanted kind of a military look, a kind of a very serious look. So he was going for kind of a military airplane look. What did he do? He took parts of actual airplanes, actual military airplanes, that were in salvage yards, tore them apart, put them back together in different ways, put in other stuff, and then just all these mechanical parts that he found in junkyards, and then added pipes everywhere and floor grates, egg carts and stuff like that, and put decals on there. Boom. This look. I mean, you could look at this and go, "Oh, that's a control room." The hallways. I've got two of the same picture. I'm a moron. Yeah, actually, here's another one. Here's another picture of the bridge. Does that not look like the inside of a 737? You look at that and go, this is a room where some sort of gigantic spaceship vehicle is controlled. Unless you have lived under a rock your entire life, you can just take one look at this picture and know that's a control room for some sort of big vehicle, whether it goes under the water, through the air, or in outer space. Either way, you can just tell instinctively, by common sense, that's what this room is for. And the fact that you would do that instinctively would only happen if it was a great design. If you instinctively means you don't even have to think about it. So Ridley Scott has communicated to you automatically that this is what this is. And game designers have, since this film is so significantly important significant in history, I mean, they just looked at that and said that's what spaceships look like in the future. I go through all these video game what's the word, portfolios, and I mean a lot of them look like the interior of the Nostromo. My portfolio looks like the interior of the Nostromo. As a matter of fact, my portfolio contains a complete and total recreation of the Nostromo inside and out. I love it that much. So I'm, just kind of a buyer beware in full disclosure there. I also mentioned that a submarine is conceptually the same thing as a spaceship. So the hallways, and there's all kinds of hallways because it's a horror film, and they have to, they're running from the monster in like this big maze that is the inside of a spaceship, so they're always running through these corridors. The corridors look like the interior of a submarine. So that's where we get this. That looks like the inside of a submarine. Now, here's the thing. If you don't know history, you don't know what the inside of a submarine looks like. More importantly, you don't know whether or not to find out what the interior of a submarine looks like. So again, it's, history, literature, design, foreign languages, industrial design, all that stuff comes to play. Design is so universal. I've said that 2 or 3 times this semester, and it's more true now than it was before. I really should have made a PowerPoint of this. So anyhow, there is the design foundation for the inside of a spaceship, and since so many science fiction games are based off of an interpretation of the inside of the Nostromo, that's where we're going to get a lot of our Photoshop content. That's how we're going to spend a lot of our time in Photoshop. So we'll go ahead and start on that next.